Good evening. My name is Millicent Lambert, graduate student at Liberty University. This is my Interpersonal Communication Project, HSCO 508. Next slide. So for this project, I'm going to be discussing some of the techniques I've learned throughout the course to enhance and enlarge my conversation and communication. So I want to start with my overarching goal. My overarching goal is to communicate with others in a way that promotes health and healing through active listening and the fostering of relational intimacy. I will diligently work to be respectful of others' thoughts and feelings while providing encouragement through biblical counsel. I have also included on this slide one of my favorite Bible verses that has really stuck with me throughout this course from James 1:19. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Next slide. So one may wonder, what is enlarging the conversation? Enlarging the conversation utilizes techniques that allow participants to talk and listen while being honest about thoughts and feelings. It opens up the conversation through hearing, encouraging, and learning about and from others. One of my favorite quotes is from the text by Peterson, and he stated that communication, it helps keep friendships vital and even makes a difference in casual relationships where you merely want ease. It grounds effective counseling, teaching, selling, conflict resolution, parenting, and learning. Next slide. So background. I'm 35 years old. I've never been married. I have no children. I received my bachelor's degree from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, minor in psychology. I'm born in Clinton, North Carolina, and I currently live in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I've been for about the past 15 years. I have an identical twin, so it's been really interesting to go throughout this course and to see how our communication styles differ. There are times when they're similar, but there are times when they're different. So it's been interesting to see what my barriers are and then also what hers are. My parents are married, but they do struggle with their communication. And outside of my professional time, I'm an advocate for eating disorder awareness. I love to speak at churches, schools, organizations, sororities, college campuses, anywhere that will allow me to come in and provide education on eating disorders and talk about awareness and education and recovery. I'm also pursuing my master's at this time in human services counseling, focusing on addiction and recovery. Next slide. So what is behavioral blend? So for this, I read an article by Varies, and he's focused on communication styles inventory. In this article, he stated his definition was the characteristic way a person sends verbal, paraverbal, and nonverbal signals in social interactions denoting who he or she is or wants to be, how he or she tends to relate to people with whom he or she interacts, and in what way his or her messages should usually be interpreted. So in taking the inventory, the personal inventory, my blend came out to be I'm an ISC or an ICS. I tend to be more passive than active, strong people skills, both outgoing and reserved. I felt like overall that the results of the inventory were very accurate based on my personality type. Next slide. How background and behavioral blend influence my communication. So I have two columns here. I have one, I tend to be more, and then I have two, I tend to be less. So this came from the inventory, and these make up my personality, style, and characteristics. I'm just going to share a few of them with you. I tend to be more delightful, trusting, careful, gentle, kind, nice, caring, and perfectionistic. I agree with pretty much what's in this column. On this side, I tend to be less. Some of the characteristics are firm, calculating, analytical, strong-willed, decisive, asserting, risk-taking, and courageous. I would say out of the list, the only two that I struggle with accepting are the risk-taking and courageous. I feel like I've grown in that area the past few years, and I actually tend to consider myself a very courageous person. So that was probably the only thing that didn't really line up with me. Next slide. Communication barriers. This quote is from the book by Peterson, Why Don't We Listen Better? And I felt like it really hones in on the topic of barriers in communication. We all have times when something is troubling us and we want a listener and need to talk it out. But sometimes the person we choose not only doesn't listen, but takes the conversation off in a completely different direction. Next slide. So in this slide, we're going to look at hearing versus listening. As we are learning how to communicate better, we have to understand that hearing is accidental, involuntary, and effortless. We have ears that God gave us. Unless we have a medical condition, they work appropriately. We can go through our entire day and we hear everything around us, but that doesn't mean that we're listening or receiving it. Listening is a focused, voluntary, and intentional. It's very much of an active process. Next slide. My personal barriers. So my personal barriers in communication that I'm going to discuss with you are self-disclosure, hearing what I want to hear, and biased listening. Next slide. Self-disclosure. According to Stewart, self-disclosure is revealing to another person how you perceive and are reacting to the present situation and giving any information about yourself and your past that is relevant to an understanding of your perceptions and reactions to the present. So there's some components of self-disclosure that I do want to point out. Focuses on present, not the past. Reactions include feelings and facts. That's when you respond in self-disclosure that include feelings and facts. Self-disclosure is two-dimensional in both breadth and depth, and it is reciprocal. So this is a barrier for me, and I really want to work on this in appropriate ways and learn how to utilize it when it's appropriate, when it's needed, to really carry relationships to the next level. Next slide. Hearing what I want to hear. Now this can be a barrier for many people, and it is one of mine. So this happens when I only hear what I want to hear and not what is actually being communicated. This can occur because of one or many filters. So one of the filters that some of the filters that I evaluated for myself on this are when my emotions are heightened, when I'm in a difficult or sensitive conversation, and if the person is speaking is angry. So I tend to only hear what I want to hear, and I find that it's more emotional. If I'm emotionally out of whack or sensitive, then I tend to shut down. So maybe it's a protection mechanism I'm using at that time, but I do want to try to work on that. Next slide. Green flag words. So green flag words are positive words that spark an emotion, response, and conversation. These words can often interfere with listening, just like red flag words, which are negative. The positive words can also interfere. For example, if I'm in a meeting with someone and they point out an accomplishment or a success or give me a compliment, hearing that actually may detour me from hearing what comes after that. So it can distract me just as much as a negative word can. So both positive and negative words can impact our listening. Next slide. Resources and strategies. So I read an article from the Journal of Listening by HSCO, and this article talked about effective listening skills, and I've included some of those here. So back channels. So effective listening skills, back channels. Short verbalizations such as and when we're listening, just to let them know that we're listening, we're following along with them. Nonverbal behaviors such as nodding and smiling, asking questions to the speaker, making eye contact, and not interrupting. All of those are effective listening skills. Next slide. My favorite, I love this one. So this is the Talker Listener Card, the TLC. I had not heard of TLC before this course, and so this is one I'm definitely going to take away with me, and I'm going to try to implement and use more often. So with the Talker Listener Card, we have goals for the talker and goals for the listener. The goals for the talker are to share feelings and thoughts without accusing, attacking, or labeling. The goals for the listener are to provide safety, understanding, and clarity without arguing, disagreeing, advising, or defending. Next slide. So my action plan in moving forward. Number 1, to slow down and take time for important conversations. I want to make sure that I can get wrapped up in busyness and tend to have more conversations that are just fluffy and not mindful, and I really want to practice and hone in on having important conversations, so to slow down a little bit. Number 2, practice the techniques discussed in the course. Practice mindful listening, acknowledge the feelings and concerns of others, and walk away. And when angry, if I'm upset or angry, that is not the time to be having a conversation because I'm not giving the listener or the talker the respect that they need. And the third one, to seek godly counsel when difficult conversations need to be had. Pray and put others' needs before my own. Next slide. My conclusion. So in this presentation, I've discussed my overarching goal in enlarging the conversation, background and behavioral blend, communication barriers, resources and strategies, and a plan of action. It has been a pleasure speaking with you this evening. I've thoroughly enjoyed this course. I definitely recommend it for anyone who wants to improve their communication skills. Some of the references and texts we've used have been phenomenal. So thank you so much, and I appreciate your time. Have a good night and God bless.